So these days, and I'm sure everybody in this room knows it, in churches and synagogues and temples and mosques around the world, there's been this quiet revival of the inner traditions for transforming the heart. Just as the formula for baking a loaf of bread is similar across cultures, the same techniques for compassion seem to crop up everywhere. Loosen the bonds of discursive thought. Extend the circle of caring. Cease armoring against suffering. Wish for others the same happiness you wish for yourself. Be a tender-minded steward of creation. I like the Dalai Lama's notion that the ultimate religion is simply the religion of the good heart, whatever religion you belong to formally. And whether it's Jehovah or Buddha or Christ or Lao Tzu or Allah, whether St. Paul or Maimonides, compassion has been proclaimed as an incendiary force, an alchemical reagent that can transform the most inert lead into living gold. And you all know better than most, because so many of you work hands-on in the world of compassion, which makes this talk that I'm giving really calls to Newcastle or rhododendrons to Hendersonville. Compassion isn't simply opening a spigot and coating everything in some treacly all-purpose goo. It calls for appreciating not only what comforts us, but what pierces us. Compassion comes from the Latin compatior, as some of you may know, to suffer with, to feel with. It requires a gut hunch that what I do unto others, I also do unto myself. If you think of the iconography of compassion, it's very obvious. In Hinduism, you see the god Hanuman is sort of tearing his chest open to reveal his naked heart. The Sacred Heart of Jesus in Mexican retablos is torn and bleeding. Kuan Yin is weeping, the Chinese Buddhist goddess of compassion, and reaching out 1,000 arms, each of which with a different implement to help somebody specifically out of his heartfulness. Ezekiel says, I will break your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. There's a kind of, I don't know, what do they say? What's the Pottery Barn rule? You break it, you own it? So it means that, you know, it's transformed from stone to flesh. It means you can feel. It's living matter. And that means it can also be wounded, and it can also hurt and ache. My teacher used to talk a lot about the ideal of the spiritual warrior, and he said the spiritual warrior's heart is exposed. It's so exposed that if a fly lands on the surface of it, you feel it. You know, you're vulnerable. It really echoes the wonderful remark of St. Francis, his prayer, give then your servant an undefended heart. So I think this is all about the undefended heart. What's it like to live with an undefended heart? And one answer, among others, among the answers of joy and openness and communion, is it hurts, you know, it hurts a little. The first noble truth in Buddhism is dukkha, which is usually translated from the Sanskrit as meaning suffering, which makes Buddhism seem a little gloomy, I think, sometimes, and pessimistic. But, you know, an alternate meaning in the Sanskrit is out of kilterness, in the sense that an ox cart will wobble when the axle is placed in wheels whose holes are off-centered. There's a sort of an off-centeredness, out of kilterness. Just as the ego's wish for a perfect, painless existence is inevitably out of alignment with life itself. You know, it's really sort of a statement that the thing that keeps us at arm's length from life and from each other is this fear of ever having suffering, although it's part of the characteristic of life, dissatisfactoriness, whatever you want to call it. And until we can come to grips with that, we really are living a kind of a surrogate life, a life that is lacking in a certain sort of authenticity. Making dukkha, or suffering, or whatever, you know, whatever the translation is, a foundational truth could be seen as an injunction for authentic experience of life and each other, both unarmored and unafraid.